What's the difference between a headless CMS system and a traditional CMS system? Today I'm going to break that down, but more importantly, I'm going to talk about how that relates to business owners or anybody that's managing a website. So let's get into it. So when we talk about traditional CMS systems, let's first start by establishing what CMS stands for. And CMS stands for Content Management System. It's essentially where you manage all the content on your website. So if you have a website right now on WordPress or Wix, you log into your application and you change the text, the headlines, the pictures. You're managing the content on there, and that comes with your CMS. So that's your CMS system in that scenario. Now, when it comes to a website, the way that they are generally built is that you have one unit. So right here on this example, you have a unit where the content and the front end are connected together. And the front end is how your website looks. It's how it feels. It's that whole user experience that if I were a visitor on your website, it's what I'm seeing. That's the front end. Then the front end is tied to the content. So the content is where you're managing the content, and that's essentially one unit. It's one piece. So I mentioned Wix and WordPress, and those are traditional CMS systems. Now there's a bunch more out there. There's Webflow, there's Squarespace, Shopify. There's a ton, and I'm not going to get into those in this video, but most website builders out there are in a traditional CMS system. Now, how that differs from a headless CMS system is that now in this scenario, your front end is no longer tied to your content system, your back end. Now they're connected with something called an API. And I'm not going to get into what that means in this video, but if you are curious about learning more about an API, then drop a comment down below and I can do a separate video on that. But your front end can be whatever you want. Let's say you're a front end developer and maybe you like React as a JavaScript framework, then you can make that your front end. And then your content system could be whatever your team wants to manage the content on. So it could be WordPress, it could be Shopify, it could be a headless CMS system like Sanity. And essentially the content is managed on that platform, but then the front end code is built and rendered completely different with a different application. So this becomes powerful for business owners in, I would say, two main scenarios. The first one is, well, before I get into that, let me just give you one more detail about this headless CMS implementation. The cool thing now is that because your front end is no longer tied to your back end, now you can connect multiple front end systems to your back end, to your one point for your content. So now, for example, if you have your website, which could be your front end application, that could be one system on the front end, but then you could also have a mobile app. Like if you have an iOS app or something like that. You could even have a smartwatch or anything else where you're sending data to. Your content system on the back end could be tied to all those systems, and you just change it once on the back end and then it gets deployed on all those systems on the front end. So that could become really powerful if you have that kind of business that would rely on this model. So this leads me into the final point of talking about where this becomes useful for business owners. The way that Headless CMS is set up, there are two main applications or two main use cases that I think are really important for a business that's considering a Headless CMS. The first one is this scenario here where I have depicted these three different applications tied to one content system. This is if you have a business and you have multiple apps, like you have a website, a web app, a mobile app, any sort of other app or anything that's connected to any system that you want to send like data to, then that's where that becomes really powerful. For example, like I'm going to a conference later this month, and one of the things that I noticed is that on the website, you can go online and you can see the list of speakers that are going to be there. You can see the sessions that they're going to have and all that stuff. But you could also go on the mobile app, and within the mobile app, you'll see that same information. So I'm not on their dev team, so I don't know this for a fact, but to me, it looks like they're using a headless CMS system where they're able to connect these different applications together. Another scenario where this becomes helpful for business owners is if you are feeling limited or you're feeling really tied to your backend system and it's not letting you create unique custom experiences or unique features. So for example, if you have a website on Wix or Squarespace, when you build on there, you can only build so far, right? You have to use their builder, and you can add features and functionalities, but a lot of times you'll be capped at what you can do with them. You'll be capped at either adding certain animations or adding certain functionalities, certain things within your website that you need. And sometimes brands, like, they just feel stuck with a template builder like that or a drag and drop builder like that. And then they'll decide that instead of doing that, they want a completely custom experience and they want to separate that. And so that's where they start talking about maybe doing a headless CMS. A good example of this is something that I've seen a lot in the e-commerce and the Shopify space. Shopify's main CMS system is built on Liquid, and they also have now a new component to their headless CMS feature that they rolled out a few years ago, and that's called Hydrogen. And the reason why they did that is because they realized that a lot of developers were building headless CMS systems using Shopify because Shopify's e-commerce is amazing. They have a solid backend system with great e-commerce capabilities and security. And you can manage product on there, customers, orders, and all that good stuff for e-commerce. And instead of being tied to what you can do within Liquid, a lot of developers were just connecting that to like a React application. And now Hydrogen is built on React and Remix, and so now they even empower more developers to build headless CMS systems on Shopify. So that's another example where that becomes really powerful. What do I recommend for most businesses? Well, I would say that for 90%, maybe even 95% of small business owners, I would recommend going with a traditional CMS system. And the reason for that is because it's a lot faster and cheaper, and oftentimes you don't need a headless CMS system. So if you have a website where maybe you just want to showcase your work, your portfolio, show some product on there, sell stuff online, but you don't need anything necessarily complicated or out of the box, then that's where a traditional CMS system can come in handy. And like I said, it will save you a lot of time and money, especially with the upfront development. Now, if you're a brand that maybe you've already tried those systems and you feel tied and you don't feel like you can create a lot of custom experiences on there, or your development team says that they're limited to what they can deliver for you, then that's where a headless CMS system might start to come in handy. Or if you realize that you're going to be going down the path of having multiple applications with your business later on, like a website, a mobile app, or anything like that, then a headless CMS system can be a good approach for you. Now, if you are going to go with the traditional CMS system, make sure you watch this other video that I made where I talk about how to choose a CMS system, and I give my recommendations as to the top recommended platforms that I would use right now in 2025.